Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We do hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us as we build up to Wolves to come in the big match preview here on Last Word on Spurs. I know it feels a lot has gone on since Monday and things just don't stop going on at the moment in the life of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Plenty to discuss right now. If you're listening to the show for the first time, where have you been? We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on X, we're on Instagram, we're across all the social media, and we are back. Let's hope some of the players are ahead of Saturday to come. We're joined by three great returning guests to Last Word on Spurs. We're going to give you their views on a crazy time to be a Spurs fan right now. I think that we're all still very much optimistic. We're positive with a shed of maybe a little bit of concern to come in these next couple of weeks. Back on Last Word on Spurs, been co-hosting for a while. We may be discussing transfer season pretty much soon. We've got wonderful Matty Hayes back. Matt, how are you, bud?
I'm all good. Recovered from the chaos that was that was Monday night. Still, obviously, look, plenty to talk about, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. But happy to be back on with you, Ricky, and a couple of fantastic guests tonight.
Oh, likewise, mate. Thank you so much as always. Also back on the show, she had a blinding debut. We had to bring her back for more. We've got the wonderful Davina _THFC on the X. Davina, how are you? Well?
I'm all good. How are you?
I'm not bad. Just recovering over Monday. Potentially recovering over Monday. Just feels like, Davina, we've got more bad news potentially to come at the moment, right?
Let's not try and think about it too much. I'm sure we'll discuss it later on, but let's look at the positive sides.
Absolutely. No, you're right. Look, Spurs still sitting there second in the Premier League. And of course, when you look at where Spurs are, I think if someone said to you, you'd have 25, 26 points after 11 games, I don't think anyone would have thought that. So I think it's fair to say, like you said, Davina, important to keep on the right side, the positive side of things. Make up our panel, like to have him back on. The last time he was on, he was having to discuss a lot of things with some angry Liverpool fans. It means it can only be Mitch Fretton back on Last Word on Spurs. Mitch, how are you? You're still smiling at the moment?
I'm very good. I'm always here for the chaos, Ricky. You know me. But yeah, pleasure to be back on. Loads to get through, and I'm looking forward to getting some venting in, and then looking forward to the weekend, hopefully in a positive manner, and of course being on with some great guests as well. So really looking forward to the show.
Mate, likewise as always, the show does go on. Talk about show going on. I think it's fair to say some would describe it as a show on Monday night. Not the most positive show they would have been to, despite the fact that at the end, there was an encore of celebration amongst our Spurs fan base that remained and clapped every single one of the players off the pitch. Matt, I'll try my best not to focus too much on this because this is the big match preview for Wolves, but I have to ask you about that crazy cut game on Monday night that unfortunately saw Spurs' unbeaten run come to an end. 2 red cards, 2 key injuries, 5 goals, 5 disallowed goals, 9 VAR checks in the first half alone. From start to finish, a game that lasted 112 minutes with a 4-1 scoreline. How do you reflect now, Matt, a few days after it settled on that defeat to Chelsea and just the nature of how that game started and how it finished, Matt?
Well, I mean, God, when you list it out like that, it really drives home just how chaotic and truly bizarre that game was. Look, it was a game that just chopped and changed the whole way through. You mentioned how we started. I thought we started the game arguably our best 15 minutes of the season. We were passing out from the back and bypassing that Chelsea press like it was absolutely nothing. And some of the quick interplay that we were doing in midfield was so effective. And there was a few instances in there with Sarr and Basuma, Maddison and Porro coming in there as well, where there was 3 or 4 quick passes in that midfield that completely eliminated the Chelsea midfield from the game, and we were away in on their back line. And Maddison, of course, at his best before he picked up that injury. That pass for the first goal was absolutely fantastic. It then obviously changed, and I think we saw the worst of Tottenham for a little bit there, with all kind of starting. The catalyst of it all was that Udogie challenge, which for me personally, I think he should have been sent off. It's one of those where he didn't make contact, which did save him, but he's gone in off the ground, studs up, 2 feet. If that was against us, we would have been calling for a red card, no doubt about it. So I think it's only fair to be consistent and say the same the other way. And Romero, we know what happens when the red mist descends for him. And I agree with most people that I don't think he went into that challenge aiming to hurt Enzo Fernandez. But I think when you go in as strong as he did, I think you're responsible for the safety of your opponent. And I think he let Enzo Fernandez down in that instance, and probably it was the correct decision to walk. Udogie, his red card was just naivety, and I think it was a young player who was in a an atmosphere of a London derby that he's just not quite used to. And I think he just got a bit in his own head, a bit ahead of himself, and just a bit overzealous and deserved to go as well. But the positives, like Davina is asking for, they were there in abundance. Guglielmo Vicario, that performance was absolutely outrageous. And if that was the only positive of the game, it would have been a big enough positive for us to come out and be looking forward to the season ahead. Some of those saves that he made, there was 3 in particular. There was one from Sterling in the first half when he was after Van de Ven went flying across him, and Sterling cut it back onto his right foot, and Vicario telegraphed that shot into the far corner. There was another one, I think it was Nicholas Jackson in the second half, where he went in on goal, and Vicario just came out, did the starfish, as people like to call it, made the save there. And the one from Cucurella as well, when he dived down at his feet. And what was most impressive of that for me was they were 3 really, really similar situations, one-on-ones with these Chelsea players, with a chance to put it in the corner. He's approached all of them in different ways, but in the absolutely perfect way. That decision-making to be able to stop all of those were absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, and I know there's a lot of people that disagree with this, I loved the high line. I absolutely loved the chaos and the absolute madness that ensued from it, but it just shows the unwavering approach that Ange Postecoglou has to the way he wants to play football. And looking at some of the previous managers we had with Conte and Jose, where we're playing that defensive football that we don't like, and those managers have themselves said that team is a bit more defensive than I want them to be. I'm not asking them to sit at the edge of the box. They're doing this themselves, and it implies a lack of trust that these players have in the manager. But look at what they did on Monday night. Playing that 7-1 formation at times, all of them on the halfway line. The trust that they need to have in Ange Postecoglou, but also the trust that Ange Postecoglou needs to have in them to ask them to play that way was absolutely fantastic. And I think we're going to take a lot more out of that game in terms of what we are going forward than we would have taken out of some of those wins this season, because it was such a defiant and almost culture-changing performance that this is Tottenham now. This is the Tottenham that we've wanted for the last 5 years that we haven't been able to get from the managers that have been in place. But we know for a fact now we have a man in that dugout who is the same as me, he's the same as you, Ricky, as Mitch, Davina. He wants the exact same thing from this Tottenham team, but the difference is he's actually able to go and make that happen, and he's shown that he's going to do it no matter what.
Absolutely. I mean, again, people jovial with the fact that can we do that against Manchester City? I am, Matt, going to shortly press you on that press, not quite literally, but Davina, to come round to you. Look, for a night that was meant to all be about the return of Mauricio Pochettino, I think it's fair to say that almost got drowned out by the nature of the chaotic game itself that played out in front of our eyes. 2 quick red cards, as I mentioned, 5 disallowed goals, 5 actual goals. And as we said there, 2 quick red cards for Romero and Udogie that really changed the face of the game. You add to that, of course, the 2 key injuries Spurs may be facing in Mickey van der Ven and James Maddison. How do you reflect, Davina, on, you called it you wanted to be a positive show. So I want to ask you your thoughts on that game for you. You was there at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now looking back a few days after, have you recovered from it, and how do you sum it up?
Honestly, being there, watching that game live with my own eyes, it felt like a fever dream. Like that whole first half, I was sort of like, no, this can't be real. And every time there was a VAR call or like an offside given, like, just, surely not. And it was all a mess. But do you know what? It was a good kind of chaos, in the sense that even when we were down to 9 men, it's the whole reason why I have a season ticket, watching exciting football, because towards the back end of last season, it was sort of like, we play at home again. Gonna have to go to Tottenham and watch some dreadful football. And at no point did I feel like that during that game, even if, we were conceding chances. But like Matt said, I'm so happy with the high line that Ange was playing. He stuck to his guns, and I don't think we can even be shocked by it, because he said it before and he isn't going to change the way that he plays. I mean, even with the quality of players, we obviously did concede 2 late goals, but you can't really, I say you can't really fault Ange's tactics there, because not to place any blame on players, but the defense that we had on the pitch might not have been able to stop those goals if we were playing a low block. So it wasn't really their fault that we were conceding those chances. For me, it was really positive, again, trying to bring out those positive vibes. It was positive to see free-flowing attacking football, seeing that expansive vision that Ange has spoken about again and again, even when we are 9 men down, even when we are sort of like really opening up ourselves to like counter-attacking football. So still playing the way that Ange has always said that he wanted to, sticking to his philosophy, I'm all here for it. And maybe we will be punished a lot more if we go 9 men down against a Manchester City side at the Etihad. But if we are sticking to our guns and we are sticking to sort of the way that we want to play, I'm all here for it, really.
Mitch, by the fact that Matt and Davina have both brought it up in their opening intro, I have to come to you, Mitch, and get your thoughts, not only on the game itself, but of that high line, because it was clear that Postecoglou instructed his players to play an extremely high line that would attempt to constrict Chelsea to fewer chances and then playing on the offside trap. And again, look, whilst it worked ever so well for a while, it took 20 minutes for Chelsea to really figure it out and take the lead. But even then, we saw Spurs created their own few chances. You know, they were so unlucky to not get an equaliser through Eric Dyer, Rodrigo Bentancur, Heung-min Son. And I think despite the fact that obviously a 4-1 scoreline looks really, really ugly on Tottenham, it is extremely harsh when you consider Spurs were right in that game until, what, the 93rd and a half minute. How do you sum up, Mitch, overall the game itself and the tactics Postecoglou did employ there in regards to the second half, and how obviously we did have to go down to 9 men and ultimately, got to say, we went out fighting?
Yeah, look, Ange said it in his post-match press conference, didn't he? He said we could be playing with 5 men and I'd still have a crack at it. And look, Spurs fans have been crying out for someone like him for so many years now, for since Poch went, really. And the idea that you want to bring in someone who is going to just have a go and play that attacking football and just give that entertainment factor to the fans. And that's exactly what we did. Look, their 3rd and 4th goals came in the dying minutes when really, you know, you're going Hail Mary at the game at that point anyway, because you're 2-1 down. You want to try and, I guess, rescue a goal and a point towards the end. But it was such a weird game, like you've already mentioned, the atmosphere of the crowd and the support the players still got right up to the final whistle and even afterwards. I think coming back to sort of the whole idea of playing the high line when we're playing with 9 men and, you know, inviting all that pressure onto us, I think when you think about it, realistically, how often are we going to be playing football matches with 9 men? Not very often. So it's going to be a rare occurrence to see us so out of shape and so out of sorts like that. And it almost looked as if we were playing higher with 9 men than we did with 11 men. And I think that might have been a deliberate tactic, just purely try and cause chaos and completely catch them out. I mean, Chelsea have got such a quick attacking line that, you know, they were still caught offside so many times from that high line. And there were plenty of instances where you could see what they wanted to do and it was working. And like, again, you've mentioned, we still fashioned a lot of chances with 9 men. Think about the game against Liverpool when they went down to 9. And I know they sat back in a low block, but really they didn't have a sniff or create much for the entire rest of the game. And it was the complete opposite for us against Chelsea. We were still going for it. We were still pressing with 2 less people on the pitch and we were still creating chances. And on another night, you know, one of them goes in. Dyer's goal is onside. Bentancur puts his in the back of the net. And we could be sat here talking about the fact that we walked away with a 2-2 draw against Chelsea with 9 men. So, look, I agree with Davina. I think there's a lot of positives to talk about tonight. And I don't think losing 1 game across the opening 11 in the Premier League season with a new manager in charge is really going to upset too many people. I can understand why people are frustrated with how we played when we went down. And I have a few mates who are like, you know, if you sit in and you sit with a low block with 9 men, I would very much have backed Spurs to get a draw because Chelsea really struggled to break down a low block. They struggled to take their chances as it is. Pochettino's openly said in his press conferences, we struggle to break down a low block. But I think, again, we just look at the positives. You have to think about the first 15 minutes of that game, Ricky. They could not live with us. And that is the Tottenham that we're going to see for the majority of this season. It's just an odd occurrence what we had to go through for most of the game on Monday night. The first 15 minutes we were tearing them apart, and if Son's goal that would have put us 2-0 up that was ruled out for offside, if that had counted, I think the game would have been completely different. We wouldn't have been under so much, I guess, stress to push, because you know what Ange likes. He doesn't want to sit on a 1-0 lead. He wants to go out, get the second, get the third, and have complete control of the game. So, you there's that as well. And we've got a young team. We have a young squad. And the Arsenal game, of course, was probably the biggest game of the season up until the Chelsea one. Going away to Arsenal was absolutely huge. So the players know what that means. But for a lot of those players that were out there on Monday night, you're at home in front of a really excited crowd who have been so impressed with how we've been playing against, to some people, our biggest rivals in Chelsea. There's a lot of energy coursing throughout that stadium, and it heightens the likes of Romero, Udogie, who's so all in on the way that he plays with his tackling and with his going forward, that a couple of mistakes come out. It's the first time we've seen anything rash from Romero this season in terms of his tackling. And, there were a couple of occurrences that he probably could have been sent off for. So look, I was disappointed and I was angry and I was upset at the time. When we went down to 9 men, I got really, really frustrated. But when I woke up on Tuesday morning, I wasn't angry at all. And I don't think I could have really have given that reaction over the last couple of years. So yeah, it's a sign of change at Spurs, and it's just a positive. And weirdly, I'm looking forward to the Wolves game, even though our squad, as we know at the moment, isn't looking great unless we hear some good news over the next few days.
No, true. We're going to share very shortly where we do stand on the injury front. I mean, that list is getting bigger and bigger. It may not even fit on this YouTube show that we're trying to record it, but we will try and do that. Matt, coming around to you, Mitch brought him up there, Christian Romero. The critics would say this moment was always going to be coming with Romero at some point. I mean, look, he's done so well, as Mitch has said, this season. It's the first type of any bother that he's been in. He does play on the line, doesn't he? He does play almost, as we say, Romero, with that situation where it's always an element of risk. It's a gamble. That's kind of what makes him the player he has done. But look, I think we all felt that giving him that vice captaincy was going to really spur him on, pardon the pun. And look, he's earned so much praise from Postecoglou, his teammates. The fact he's also been nominated for the Player of the Month award for October just tells you how far he has come. But I just wonder, Matt, do you feel... I don't want to blame it on Ange, because Ange is an absolute superb motivator. Do you reckon maybe the pre-match motivational talk beforehand is what really stirred Romero and Udogie, because they went out there and quite literally just left everything out on the pitch? And let's be honest about it, Udogie and Romero were quite lucky to have not have gone before they were sent off. So how do you analyse Romero? And is there a wider concern for you, Matt, that the fact that I think it's 4 red cards in 75 games, if you equate that really, it's 18 games over the course of a spell where he's due a red card. Is it the fact that it's just in his game, Matt, and we have to live with that, or is that a discipline issue for you?
It probably falls somewhere in the middle, and I don't want to sit on the fence, but it's not something that we can just accept as part of his game, because if he's going to get 2 or 3 red cards per season, that's going to cost us points. That's going to cost us games. Now, in the ability that he has and in the way that he plays, he's going to gain us more points than that over the course of a season. But it's almost what you expect of a defender of his quality. So I don't think you can balance it out in that way. It's something that he does need to figure out how to deal with. There are a lot of players that have that kind of rash, not aggressive, but I'd say impulsive side to their game that can cost them. And the best tale of that, I think, at Spurs was with Dele Alli, and how Pochettino, when he was at our side of London, was trying to tame that side of Dele Alli. And there's such a fine line, because if you take that side of his game out too much, you then lose a lot of what he's good at. Because like you said, Romero does live on the line. He lives on the edge. And there's a lot of tackles where if he's half a second earlier or half a second later into that tackle, he's probably going to walk. But the brilliance of his game is that he's the majority of the time able to time those so well. So it's tough to justify what he's done, but I also don't think it's a case of, we need to replace him. Because I know some Spurs fans have been saying that he's too much of a liability. We need to get someone else in there. This is always there for him. He's also a defender who's trying to learn how to adapt to this new style that we're playing in. Because he came into Spurs and it was defend, defend, defend. Whereas now it's not going to be like that. He's going to learn how to be a bit more isolated in the way that he's defending, because he's not going to have that bank of 4 midfielders in front of him. He's not going to have the fullbacks either side that can help him out if he does make a mistake. So even though he's been here for 2.5 years, even though he is 25 years of age, he is still learning and trying to adapt to something new. So I'm not concerned that it's going to become a case where we're sitting here next season and it's been another 4 red cards, and after that another 4 red cards. But I was, on the point you made about Ange and how he motivated them before the game, I have been trying to figure out why they lost their heads in that game. Because like you said, Udogie, Romero, potentially both could have got 2 red cards. Pap Sarr, I don't know if you saw that photo that he put up on one of his stories, but he grabbed Levi Colwill by the neck. He realistically, he could have walked for that as well. So there was something there. The players were just a little bit over fired up. Again, it could just be the heat of a London derby. It could have been the feeling maybe that the game was getting away from them that added that extra bit of frustration to it all. But there's not going to be a single person who's more upset about that Romero card than Romero, and there's not going to be a single person who's more upset about the Udogie red card than Udogie himself. And I'm sure Ange will have said what needs to be said to them, and that we'll see an improvement going forward, and we're not going to see these mistakes in big games again. But for the night that we're looking at, the two of them did let us down. The two of them did cost us the game. Like Mitch said, if that Son goal had gone in, it would have been a different game. If we have 11 men on the pitch, it's a very, very different game as well. So right now, I'm really annoyed at them, but let's be honest, we all still love them.
We do love them. Davina, I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate here. Do you think Ange, at a couple of breaks in play when they were already have known the fact they could have maybe have gone before they made their subsequent challenges, Romero and Udogie, do you think there was an opportunity there for any of the players, Sonny being the captain, Ange being, of course, the head coach, to really try and get in their ear and say, look, just calm down. It's a London derby. Because I think Chelsea, Maurizio, I think, knew exactly what he was doing with those Chelsea players. They were fired up, and they could just see there was that spark in the players there, almost in a way in which there was an intention. Naturally, they want to get the players sent off because it was going to make Chelsea's game a lot easier, which it obviously turned out to be so. Do you think, again, playing devil's advocate, that more could have been done to stop both of those guys being sent off?
Ooh, that's a tricky one because it's a London derby, and for Chelsea, it's their biggest game of the season. Some Spurs fans think it's our biggest game, but I think for Romero, it's not his first game of this magnitude. And for me, where the issue was the biggest was that this isn't the first time that he's got a red card in a really big game. Like thinking back to AC Milan Champions League last season, we were still in with a chance to call it to go through, and that red card kind of just ruined everything for us in that game. So for me, it's sort of he's now been given the vice captaincy position. He has to control his anger a little bit more. It's not sort of I want to make this challenge and I'm not going to think about the consequences, because I'm sure he's well aware of the fact that our defense isn't a position where we have a lot of options, and he's a very key player in the way that Ange will set up his team. So like Matt said, I think if you try and control that side of him, then you'll lose the very being of what makes him him. So it's a tough one of trying to control sort of how much do you get rid of that fire and passion and eagerness to always want to go 100% in versus calming everything down and being a more sensible player. It is a tricky one, but I think the occasion got the upper hand, and I think a couple of the players might have been playing the occasion rather than the actual game. So I was angry at the time, but I love Romero, and I think he's one of the best centre-backs in world football. So if anything, it will be a learning experience. And hopefully, like Matt said, this time next season, we're not talking about another 2 or 3 red cards that he's got since.
Yeah, I agree on that, Davina. I think the key is now, how does he respond and react when he does get back into the team? Look, obviously, the big frustration with Romero is to lose him for the games we've got coming up. Of course, Wolves, Aston Villa, and most worryingly, Manchester City, all compounded by the likelihood of Mickey van der Ven's absence. And I know many are also getting very excited by the fact we saw a picture of Mickey at Hotspur Way, which we're going to show shortly, where he looks like he's all right. Maybe we can have him as a cardboard cutout for the weekend. But again, I think there is concern over what is to come for Mickey van der Ven, that's for sure. Mitch, coming round to you, just want to get your take on Udogie sending off, because I think there was almost a sense of really widespread relief when he was in the team for this game, because I think all of us felt he's been so good at the start of the season, Udogie. These are the games that we're going to need him for. Now, look, I think it's fair to say that all of us felt a real sigh of relief how somehow he didn't get sent off for the initial lunge, which ended up being a 2-footed challenge. You would have hoped at that moment that the penny may have dropped to think, okay, already, riding a real tightrope here, can't afford anything else. But second half, and that's again the frustration. He had a chance at half time to calm down. Ange could have maybe got in his ear, players around him could have got in his ear, Sonny being the captain. Do you have any explanation, Mitch, in your mind as to what makes Udogie dive in like that when he's already on a yellow card? And look, he's a young guy. It's his first season in Tottenham, first proper London derby against Chelsea. How do you reflect on that now, Mitch, the sending off of Udogie?
I think there's probably a couple of factors to it. It was an anticipation challenge. I think the first touch from Sterling or the pass from Sterling, whatever it was, wasn't where it was supposed to be. So Udogie sort of just backed himself to get ahead of him in that ball, which I completely understand. He's very quick and very agile, and he'll back himself to win 50-50s and get to the ball before his opponents. So there's that. There's also perhaps the question of, was he really fully fit? Because we know that he had a late fitness test on the day of the game and everyone was sweating. Is he going to be fit? Is he going to be ready to play? So although obviously he was fit enough to play, you could maybe question, was there still a bit of tiredness or fatigue or a little bit of that injury that he'd been carrying that maybe just leaked through and affected him mentally, and thought, oh God, I don't know if I can track back and prevent this if they break. I'm just going to go for the challenge instead. Having said that, his first challenge early in the game was a bit silly. I'm really torn on these, right, Ricky, because I don't want to sound like an idiot and I don't want to annoy people. But if you'd have asked me on Monday night after the game, do I think that first challenge from Udogie was a red card, and do I think what Romero actually got sent off for were red cards, I would have turned around to you and said no. Now, obviously, having had a look at them multiple times now and having reflected on them, I can absolutely see why they were both shouts for red cards. But I just think that in Udogie's case, it's inexperienced. I think Davina mentioned it a minute ago. It's not Romero's first time in this caliber of sort of game. It kind of is for Udogie at a club of our stature and the derby that he's playing in against a team that notoriously always just seem to be able to beat us and have our number. I saw an absolutely horrible stat of Chelsea's record at our new stadium that I'm not even going to mention because it makes me feel a little bit grim. But yeah, look, he'll learn from it when he's so young and he's got a lot of football left to play in his career. And these things happen to every player at this level. They will have their moments where they make mistakes. They get themselves sent off. They get themselves into a bit of trouble, and he'll come back and hopefully he'll learn from it because he's such an integral part of the team. You have a look at the reaction all over social media when it came out 15-20 minutes before the lineups were released that Udogie's fit and he's starting. Everyone was so relieved, and he's such a part of the furniture at Tottenham already. So yeah, it was a frustrating one, and Matt said it as well. No one will be more disappointed than him for getting sent off. So we just have to get behind him. We have to support him. We know how good he can be and how important he's going to be for us this season. Give him the weekend off, obviously. Let him do what he needs to do over the international break and come back and we go again for a tough run of fixtures.
Absolutely. Look, what we are going to do, guys, I'm going to save you the trouble. We're going to put Chelsea to bed firmly. And what we are going to do is go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. We have got over 1,000 plus of you watching us live across all of our platforms. As always, thank you so much for all your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. I do want to say that we're moving on to more positive things. And then I have to remind myself of the injury list Spurs are currently trying to deal with. And just to bring everybody up to speed, I must just time stamp this and time check this. We're recording here on Wednesday evening. There hopefully be more positive news on the morning commute when you're listening to this show back, or on the Friday when, of course, we'll be waiting to hear from Ange Postecoglou. As of right now, Tottenham Hotspur are still waiting to learn the severity of Mickey van der Ven's hamstring. The Dutchman is set for a scan once the swelling has subsided before the club decides on a course of appropriate recovery. Now, friend of the show, Paul O'Keefe, informed us via X that he was going to have a scan either on the Wednesday or Thursday, but there is no definitive answer currently because the fear is a bad one because of how he pulled up. But currently, nobody knows the true extent of the injury. What it must be said is for our watching audience here, which I am going to share this image, Mickey van der Ven was spotted at Hotspur Way earlier on Wednesday. And that photo circulated of him was definitely on the Wednesday, along with Spurs forward Heung-min Son. However, there is still no definitive answer to the extent of that injury at the moment. We also have been informed by Paul that the trio of James Maddison, Spurs forward Richarlison, and defender Pedro Porro did not train also at Hotspur Way on Wednesday. We'll be giving you a more conclusive update in the show in terms of injuries. But Matt, to kickstart with you, look, he left the stadium on crutches, Mickey van der Ven. I think it is worth pointing out that the fact is that he suffered a similar hamstring injury earlier in the year at Wolfsburg, which kept him out for approximately 2.5 months. He missed 12 matches during that time. I'm really not trying to put the dampener on this. I'm really, really not. I can see Davina looking at me with a real screw face at the moment, thinking this can't be the case. But Matt, how do you feel? Because at the moment we're in the gods here waiting for an update on the injury. But do you feel we've got enough in that squad to cope at the moment with Mickey van der Ven's absence, along, of course, with Romero now who's going to miss the next 3 games?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, when you said, how do I feel? I don't want to bring the language that I'd have to use, to be honest, in that to this show, because I think we're better than that. But on if we have enough, I think we do, because as much as individual quality has absolutely got us to the point where we are this season, to the point that we were top of the table after 9 or 10 games, to getting that draw at the Emirates, to beating Liverpool, so much individual quality, that man in particular, along with Romero and Maddison, who are also gone. As much as that plays a part, we do have to acknowledge just how much from a tactical standpoint that we make games incredibly difficult for opposition teams. And look, not having Maddison there is going to be a problem. Can Lo Celso go in there? Can Bentancur go in there? Is he fit enough to start? Will he be able to play advanced? I think we do have options in there. The fear is just what can we actually do at the back? And I have a lot more faith that we can deal with that, looking at how Eric Dyer and Emerson Royal dealt with having the ball in that game against Chelsea, because you always look at a manager when they're in a team, and it's a massive conversation right now with Eric Ten Hag at Manchester United, but you look at how they have improved individuals. Eric Dyer hasn't played a minute of football this season, and he looked more competent in possession in whatever duration of time he played in that game on Monday than I think he ever has at Spurs. And Emerson Royal playing out of position, a player who, look, admittedly was a little bit better in possession than he was out of possession for Spurs at times throughout his time at the club. He looked very comfortable as well. So the fact that those players who aren't getting that game time are able to step in and do not the same job, but a job, is very reassuring. Wolves not having Neto is a massive, massive loss for them. So I think that will allow us to play that high line again and not be worried about the pace and behind. I know Hwang Hee-chan is having an absolutely fantastic season, and he does offer a similar threat, but their main man is Neto, and they're not going to have him. So I think I wouldn't have said it before the Chelsea game that I thought we had enough, but based on what I saw from the players who came off the bench in the Chelsea game, I think we will be able to make something happen in this game. And you do have to remember as well, these players are going to be playing for their place in the team, because it's been a while since we've had at Tottenham a starting 11 that we know is going to start every game if they are fit. We can all name that starting 11 if all of our players are available, but now you're going to have these players coming into the squad, and Eric Dyer, based on what we heard in the summer, seems to want to get back into that team. He's going to be playing for his future at this club. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is the same. He might be tempted by Juventus, but if not, he has something to prove here, and I think that's a fantastic thing to have in these players as well. So look, I may be wrong. I wouldn't exactly be surprised if I was wrong, but I am going to go into this game with a lot of hope and kind of trusting these players that are coming in, because if Ange's going to trust them, I don't see why we wouldn't. And I have to mention as well, Ashley Phillips. You know, he's one who has had game time, obviously at a lower level, but he's match fit. He's going to be ready, and he's going to be firing if he gets his chance to come on the pitch.
Davina, I have to ask you, I mean, you've been in that stadium Monday night. I mean, how well aware at the time was you when you see Van der Ven go down like that, and then obviously lots of Romero? I have to ask you, what's going through your mind at that moment? Or is it too difficult to say or expletive to say?
It was a shock to my system, because we saw Van der Ven go down, and then we realised that Maddison was down on the other side of the pitch. And like seeing Van der Ven go down, it was like in slow motion. And then they called the physios on, and then him walking off the pitch, he was literally like leaning on two of like the physios or like the club doctors, because he couldn't put any weight on his leg. And that was just heartbreaking. Like it was similar to the feeling when we had Harry Kane and he would go down like holding his ankle and the whole stadium would go quiet because we're like, right, so season over, right? It was that kind of feeling when he went down and he couldn't get himself back up. So that wasn't nice to see. And then obviously Maddison went off at the same time, and there was just, where I sit in the South Stand, it was everyone was just sort of like, what's just happened here? Like that is like 2 of our starting 11 just completely gone in one substitution round. So very worrying. But like Matt said, individual brilliance has played a massive part in where we are. You know, second place, 11 games gone. We've played some brilliant football, and I know I've just checked the score. There's several million Manchester United fans who'd love to be in our position compared to where they are right now. But it's I think it's time to maybe start calling on the youth. They're thinking about like Ashley Phillips. You can think about sort of like even Dorrington, Santiago, who have been lighting it up in the youth as well. Yeah. I mean, Santiago, I think I checked his stats earlier on. He's on like 6 goals, 4 assists in 8 matches. He's like, if you're thinking about like creativity, we haven't got that much depth up front either. Now that obviously we might talk about this later, but Richarlison going into surgery, we're not going to have him available for a while. Maybe he won't be starting, but I think he provides a really good option off the bench. I know he's primarily a left winger, but he can play centrally. He can play on the right. He's, I don't know, is he injured?
Santiago is at the moment, yeah, he's injured at the moment. But again, maybe one that they can look at potentially, you know, second half of the season. You wonder, because again, Veliz is another option where he's been gradually given minutes. I mean, they're players doing that you feel that maybe Spurs and Postecoglou will look to call upon it. I think what you've said there, and just to let you come back on it as well, it will be interesting just how much he will use that youth element to it, because it does feel that Ashley Phillips was brought in for the situation of having to cover, if necessary. Dorrington's doing really, really well. We obviously, as Matt picked up on the fact, he was out the under-21 squad, Phillips, of course, recently. So you'd expect at least him to be on the bench. I mean, I think we've all, Davina, and you tell me how you feel on these 10, 11 games so far. We trust Ange's judgment to feel if these players are ready, they'll get an opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely. And I think the fact that we see some of these youth players like training with the first team in some of the training pitches, I think what we have seen with this season, the way that he sets up his teams, if Ange believes something is going to work, he'll put that forward. He'll put that team out, and we just have to trust his judgment at this point, because trusting his judgment hasn't done us any bad or any wrong this season so far. So whatever he thinks is right, I'm fully backing him.
Absolutely.
Can I?
Go on, Matt.
I just want to jump in on the point that Davina made about young players coming in. Well, first of all, I think it's just so perfectly encapsulating our situation at the moment that the one young player we want to call on is also injured. But I think if you are a player in this youth squad, you know, if you were called up if we had the same crisis when Antonio Conte was there, if you were called up, those players would feel they were there out of necessity. Whereas the way that Postecoglou has kind of added this uniform approach to football across all of the different youth levels, the way he's given these players a chance in training, these players are going to feel as though they're there because they deserve it. Yes, fortune is on their side that there was a few of the first team players injured, but that mentality side of things, that they know Postecoglou feels safe with them in that team, and it's something that he wants to do rather than something he absolutely has to do, that's going to make a massive difference for any of those players. If it's Ashley Phillips, if it's Santiago, if it's Donnelly, when they get into that team, that's going to make the world of difference for them.
Yeah, look, again, Matt, I think the key is here how much Postecoglou will really trust that youth element to it in these coming weeks, because you do feel, as you've touched upon there does appear to be a real genuine belief and potential in what is unearthed there from the academy, and in terms of the fact that they've been doing ever so well, of course, so far this season. I mean, Mitch, bringing you in on the back of that news, of course, that we've heard in relation to Mickey van der Ven, and of course, as we reported there from Paul O'Keefe on the Wednesday, no Maddison, no Pedro Porro, no Richarlison in training. It brings us to the fact that Richarlison, as we understand, has admitted that he will undergo surgery on his pelvis. He publicly admitted this to ESPN after the game against Chelsea. He said on the situation that, of course, I expected to play, as it was an important game in relation to Chelsea. I found out that I wasn't going to play, but it's part of football. Of course, selection call-up, you can only ask a player, and he'll, of course, want to be waiting to play. But, of course, I did expect it. I already felt that it was also time to take a break. The few months have not been easy for me. I've also been suffering my health. I think I've spoken to doctors, and I'll soon have pubic surgery. I've been suffering for 8 months, fighting, looking at the team, at the club, and I didn't look for me. I think the time has come to take a rest, to take a break. Let's see the next few days. I'll do what's best for me. I mean, look, I think we've seen Richarlison this season that absolutely he's a man that will speak his mind. I think maybe the club would have wanted to be the ones that were in control of that situation rather than Richarlison going public on it. But I just wonder how much that does affect the squad, given the fact, with no disrespect to Richarlison, he's not had a huge amount of impact, a couple of assists there and here. I think Johnson's first opening 20 minutes gives us a lot of fulfillment that he's really made for that role and will most certainly, in my mind, be a first teamer. So is it a greater loss on the eye with the fact that Richarlison may need surgery?
Look, I think when you're losing a player that you paid 60 million quid for, you have to put it down as a loss. And I think we've had this discussion before. Yes, he's not necessarily delivering in the final third in terms of his output when it comes to goals and assists, but a lot of his build-up play over the last few weeks, and especially under Ange, has gotten a lot better. He has shown glimpses this season. Having said that, Brennan Johnson, you're right, does look made for that role. I think it was really sad to see him be the one dragged off on Monday night, because I thought he started really brightly. And I just, transfer deadline day was so long ago now, and I still feel like we've barely watched Brennan Johnson play. We've had the odd glimpse of him here and there. He had a little bit of an injury at one point, and of course dragged after about 20-25 minutes on Monday. So yeah, the Richarlison stuff, I mean, I get it. I get it, because he is a player that wants to be playing every week, like every football player in the Premier League wants to. They want to be starting every single game, but I think he struggles to accept that at a club like Spurs that there are certain expectations and you have to perform to a certain level, and you have to get a lot of the basics of your game right, which I'm not necessarily sure that Richarlison does. I mean, how many times are you sitting there watching him thinking, right, that first touch wasn't very good, puts him on the back foot straight away. Compared to the other players, I mean, you look at the control of the ball on the other side Kulusevski has and the way he moves with it, and then you compare it to the left side. Do you see where I'm coming from? So in terms of him speaking to the media, again, you're right, he does that a lot. He likes to be the one that puts the news out there first off. And I don't know, maybe we'll see something similar to what happened with Sonny over the summer, who was putting off surgery for a while. He went in, got it done, and he's been absolutely exceptional this season. Hopefully Richarlison can come back and be the player that he was for Everton and just be a bit more prolific for us, because we're going to need them. Obviously, we've got so many injuries now. Again, with the youth, Santiago being injured is a bit of a blow for one of the guys that we would perhaps like to call on in his absence. Perhaps it opens the door for Bryan Hill to come in and show what he's capable of finally. But I think we're a little bit blessed in the sense that we do have a lot of attacking options these days. And hopefully we can... Do you know what, Ricky? I just want to get through this weekend without picking up more injuries, and I just get through the international break, regroup, come back together, and then just take on the Villa, Newcastle, City games and just see where we are then, because I think I might break in half if another key player, if Basuma or someone were to pick up an injury on Saturday. I think I'd really lose my head. But yeah, maybe that's just me.
It's come to that stage now. Not only losing players, we're losing guests as well at this point. No injury, can't make it up. What I will just share is where we are right now in terms of the injury crisis at Tottenham. Matt, coming around to you there, courtesy of Sky Sports there, that update is where we stand at the moment. Mickey van der Ven, obviously that's perhaps the most worrying injury at the moment, one that is still TBC. James Maddison, again, another one that took a slight knock to the ankle. We're expecting hopefully Madders will hopefully be okay for the weekend. However, must stress, as Paul O'Keefe, friend of the show, did say, didn't train on Wednesday. We hope that, of course, is just a precaution. Ben Davis, picked up an ankle tweak over Crystal Palace last week. I mean, obviously he had to be substituted, didn't make the squad for Chelsea, but we understand he is in contention for Wolves. Longer term absentees, as we already know, Ivan Perisic, Manor Solomon, Ryan Sessegnon, all coming out of action. And of course, and you add to that the Christian Romero suspension, along with Destiny Udogie. Matt, when I read you out that and you view that on the screen here, for those that are watching this live, of course, on YouTube, what's your reaction to this piling injury crisis we have in our hands at the moment, Matt?
It just hurts, Ricky. It just hurts. Because like we knew we weren't going to be as lucky throughout the entire season as we have been in the opening 10 games, that we didn't have any, I'm going to say, major first team injury. I think Solomon is the only player there that's really been in the first team enough to say that his absence is a loss. But the fact that it all happened in the space of about 12 minutes is absolutely ridiculous. Like Davina said, it just felt like a fever dream, watching player after player fall to the ground, get sent off. It's ridiculous. It's really, really bad, but it's given this team another chance, a different kind of chance to show exactly what they're made of. And it's maybe one that's coming a bit too early to say, well, we know they're going to absolutely handle it and they're going to be fine. But I think what we're seeing with I've just kind of realized with the suggestions that we're seeing come through these comments, there are a lot of players that we would have thought of 6-12 months ago as not an option for Tottenham, and players that we need to get rid of, that now we can start to kind of bring into contention and say, well, maybe they do deserve the minutes because of how much we're seeing Postecoglou really improve these players. And Brian Hill is one who's only had one cameo appearance this season. I think, yeah, okay, give him a chance. Like we were speaking about earlier, there's young players that are coming through, but like Giovanni Lo Celso, that we all thought was going to leave in the summer, he's now an option. And I think our squad is maybe a bit deeper than we had realised, than we had given credit for. So again, like I said earlier, I'm hopeful that we will have enough to deal with that and the crisis that we're seeing unfold before our eyes. But again, not exactly surprised if we don't have that.
Davina, I know you come in with of course the aspect to try and be as positive as possible. When you see that injury list piling up, do you feel we've got enough in the squad at the moment to try and get by to January as things stand?
I think we can try and get by. That's not saying that we will get by and do well. But I think a big positive, if you think about it as a positive, is that we are currently only playing one game a week, and we've got international break coming up, which will hopefully give some of the more short-term injured players a bit more time to recover, get back to their fit selves, maybe like not push Bentancur back to playing a 490 so quickly. I know that's a big worry in the sense that if we have no midfield and we need to play him, pushing him back to recover from his injury so quickly might not be a great move. But yeah, we will see. And I guess having a few injury problems like this will highlight a lot more problems. I think from the game on Monday, like the way that we were playing with 9 men, not having our full starting 11, highlighted a lot of areas where we might need to bring in some backup and might push even more activity in the January transfer window. So again, thinking about positives, trying to put a positive spin on things. We might see a few more signings than we were going to had we not had these injuries. So yeah, we'll see how everything pans out. We've got a couple of big games before that transfer window, but playing one game a week, I think we will be okay.
I mean, you bring up the January transfer window there, Davina. We know from Dan Kilpatrick from the Standard that although Spurs are still waiting to discover the extent of Van der Ven's injury, Spurs are now looking predominantly at prioritising a left-sided centre-back in January. A name being mentioned quite heavily, one that we obviously was hearing Matt again, the previous window, is Lloyd Kelly. Now, we understand he's in the last year of his contract now. You think Spurs could get him for a cut price fee. He's a player that does not only cover the left-back side, but also, let's say, centre-back as well. He counts towards the homegrown quota. Spurs coach Matt Wells looked actually after him for a period. And I think, again, he was at Bournemouth when he was assistant to Scott Parker. And you'd feel, again, with the way Spurs are going, it may probably be a young upcoming player that is of a cut price fee. I know many are probably screaming at me right now saying, go and get Tab Sober. I don't know if you guys think differently to me. I just don't see Spurs dropping 75 million on the centre back. Although you should argue maybe they should do, because Spurs have got a great chance to be right up there towards, of course, the second half of the season and beyond that. But I think it'll be very, very interesting what Tottenham do in January, because I think that'll be the key indicator that if Spurs are, as Davina mentions, coming through Wolves and the respective fixtures up until the new year, and we are there in second and we're in touching into the top, or dare I say top. I think we had a question from Cameron earlier, very kind of the trailer for this show. He was asking me whether essentially the January transfer window will be even more significant now, given the injuries. I mean, Matt, what's your feeling on that for you? Do you think Spurs will look to spend heavily if they're in this position that they are at the moment in the table?
I think we need to acknowledge the fact that January is a very long way away when you're looking at the state that Spurs are in at the moment. I think if we do get through this next kind of 4 or 6 weeks with this injury crisis, and we are still up there around Manchester City, I'm going to caveat this by saying I do not think we're going to win the league. I do not think we're going to challenge for the league. But if we are there, you imagine Daniel Levy is going to be willing to put an extra 30, 40, 50 million into that budget for the window. Whereas if we maybe drop points against Wolves and we struggle against Villa, against City, and all of a sudden it's maybe just a top 4 race when we get to January, the budget's probably going to be a little bit lower. But I also think we need to see how these players actually fare in this team without Van de Ven, without hopefully not, but potentially without Maddison as well. I think there's a lot for us still to learn before we get there. But I think regardless of that situation, I think Daniel Levy will be confident in what he's seen over the last couple of years in the transfer window with Fabio Paratici, who we're to believe is still advising, and then with the new Johan Lang coming in and another scout there, his name I've forgotten. I think he's seen enough from the recruitment to know that he can back what these people want now. This isn't the people that spent 60 million on Ndombele and Celso. These are the people that spent 17 million on Vicario and spent 20 something million on Pap Sarr and Destiny Udogie. So I think having that trust in the recruitment team is going to be much more of a factor than any injuries we might have. But I think Spurs will be busy in the January window trying to get in that extra centre back. When Dan Kilpatrick put that out earlier that we're going to be looking for a centre back following the injury to Van de Ven, I was absolutely terrified. I lost my mind that it's like, okay, well, they've identified he's out 4, 5, 6 months. Hopefully that's not the case, but the fact remains that we will need a centre back either way. Yeah,
I mean, Mitch, for you, just on that point in relation to where Spurs do go in January, I think, like Matt says there, it is very, very early still. We've got, again, 8-9 games to negotiate between now and the window opening. How do you, Mitch, see that January window now in terms of the significance of it, given the injuries that we're facing? And the fact, again, that I think we've all felt that an injury to the likes of a Maddison, a Romero, a Van de Ven, a Vicario, Heung-min Son, we are really short of depth in that squad, aren't we?
Yeah, well, we said it at the start of the season, didn't we, Ricky? We said the issues for us this season are going to be if we pick up injuries, because we have the starting 11, but we don't have the depth. And I think that has been made paramount, and I think it's suddenly a very big issue. And I think it comes back to what a lot of us were saying in the summer. We needed to sign another centre-back alongside Van de Ven. And I mean, I know we've got Ashley Phillips, and I do hope that he can break through and be a really good player for us, but we needed another centre-back that is ready to start and cover immediately. And someone like Lloyd Kelly that we've been mentioning, that I know on the deadline day show we were talking and we were discussing whether that move was going to get done, which ultimately it didn't on the day. But yeah, the transfer window all of a sudden is huge. I think I'm not going to say it is a blessing in disguise that these injuries have come, but hopefully it has opened Daniel Levy's eyes even more to the fact that we need players in January, particularly in defence. You think about the fact that Ben Davies has also really been struggling with injuries this season, and he's getting on as it is. Udogie all of a sudden suspended, and we're sat here thinking, right, well, who's going to play left back on Saturday then? So, you know, there's the argument with Sessegnon out as well. There's the argument that we need someone else in over that side. We need someone that could cover centre back. There's the potential with Solomon and Perisic and Richarlison all being out for a while. We need another left-sided attacker. So, you know, there's 3 players there straight away that all of a sudden, you know, we need to be bringing someone in. Questions can be raised. If Vicario picks up a knock or an injury, is Fraser Forster that guy to be able to come in and play? I didn't particularly seem very impressed by him in that Carabao Cup game against Fulham. The memories of him pretending to dive for their penalties at the end of the game still haunt me. So yeah, it's a huge transfer window coming up, and I really hope that they're planning for it already. And I don't want it to be left until deadline day in January. You know, that's a whole month of the transfer window being open. We need to get things done quickly and push on, because there's a real opportunity here for this team this season to get back into that top four, and you know, then push on from there. And in 2-3 seasons time, if everything goes to plan and Ange can build a squad over 2 or 3 years, who knows what we're going to be sat here talking about.
Yeah. I mean, the irony is you bring up the cup there, Mitch. You should know me by now. I mean, I'm still getting counselling for these cup exits, but I can't deal with Spurs going out of cups. Please take the FA Cup seriously when it comes around Tottenham. Davina, just to finish with you on this, and we are going to look ahead to Wolves to come at the weekend. We've not had the pleasure of having you on since you attended that Spurs fans forum. And, you know, you would have obviously been there. And I know obviously you gave us a really good spaces on that in terms of really giving us some info and insight into how everyone felt in the room there. You being there that night and now reflecting on this now, do you genuinely feel, because my argument for me, I mean, up until Ange joined was, well, if we had Conte and we had Mourinho and they weren't going to get backed, how the hell is Postecoglou going to get backed? But when you consider this start to the season, if we are going to remain on this kind of same trajectory and we are, like I said, in touching distance going into the January window, based on the feeling in that room you felt that night and where Spurs are now, do you feel that Ange Postecoglou will be back by Daniel Levy in that January transfer window?
I mean, all Spurs fans are hoping that we will be back. And we've been in positions before where we're almost there, we're nearly there. And with a couple like world-class signings, we could be that team that challenges for the title. Sorry to trigger anyone who doesn't think we're going to challenge for the title, but I think we could be there. I'm all there for it. But even to go far in the FA Cup, obviously FA Cup games start in January. We've got areas in our team where we are glaring out for more depth, and even just to bring options off the bench. I really hope that we can bring in like another centre back, another cam, just in case Maddison's injury, even if he does recover quickly, like comes back again, like in March, April next season, and we've gone bar in the FA Cup, and all of a sudden we're sort of like, who's playing in that position? I want to say also we still have that Kane money to spend if we haven't spent it already. So hopefully we could be more active in January. But I think we have to kind of be real and humble ourselves a little bit, because we've been in a position before where we're begging out for a few more signings and we just don't get it. And we're always like quibbling over a couple extra million, which could put the deal over the line. We settle for like the cheaper option, which sometimes has worked in the past, but sometimes it's sort of like, if only we had splashed out the extra couple million for that star player, that could have changed our team. But again, sticking with the positivity, I hope we do sign 3 to 4 players in the January transfer window. But
wow,
you can't guarantee anything.
No, I mean, if it's by the fact that Davina was in that room at the Spurs fans forum, if she's coming away with that kind of vibe that we're gonna go 3-4 players, Matt, strap home now, mate. January's gonna be a heavy ride on Last Word On Spurs. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Look, what we are gonna do, we are gonna go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. For our listeners on audio, you're gonna hear from the Talking Wolves podcast that give us a preview ahead of course of Tottenham Hotspur's trip to Molineux. Again, thank you so much, guys, for all your support. We are battling Champions League football here. We've got over 1,000+ of you watching us live. So again, thank you so much for all your incredible support for the show. We're joined by the wonderful Matty Hayes, the brilliant Mitch Fretton, and the superb Davina on this show, where we now gauge and look ahead to Wolves to come. God, you know what, games, I mean, they come round so quick, don't they? I mean, now you think about it. I know we only play the one game a week, but many that are still firmly in the mind of Chelsea can now look ahead to Wolves to come. It's going to be interesting, of course, for Tottenham, by the fact that, let's start with you, Matt, they, at the end of that game, we had at least, I think it was only 4 players that finished the game, that started it, which just tells you everything of the way in that game did work out. But I have to come away from Chelsea now. Look, we do face this selection conundrum at the moment. As it stands, Eric Dyer, Ashley Phillips are the only first team options available in terms of central defenders. Now, whilst Postecoglou could maybe consider Pierre-Emile Højbjerg or Emerson Royal to partner Dyer, after both did fairly well in the heart of that defence against Chelsea, he may want to go with an experience in that position. He may plump for youngster Ashley Phillips. Alfie Dorrington, as Davina mentioned, is one that has made a really good impression on Postecoglou. I think it's worth bearing in mind with Phillips that his only minutes this season have come for Spurs' development side, but he does train, as Davina says, with the first team. And he said last month that he would not be afraid to use the 18-year-old centre-half. Do you ever gauge at the moment, Matt, in terms of what he'll do come Saturday at the moment?
I'm gonna say something that I never thought I'd say, and that especially before that Chelsea game, I never thought I'd say. Eric Dyer has to start. I don't know where that's come from.
Are you sure about that?
I'm sure, and I'm fully accepting whatever's going to come through in those comments about me after saying that. I've seen a few suggestions that if we go with Emerson and Phillips, or Phillips and Højbjerg, or Emerson and Højbjerg, and those all are viable options tactically, but I don't think we can say that either of those or any of those are good options, because we need an experienced centre back there. If you're going to have someone that's going to be that's going to be clipped way out of context, I love it. We need to have someone back there. If we're going to play an Emerson who's not used to that position, or Phillips who has not played at this level before, we need someone beside them who can guide them and make sure that they know what to do. And Eric Dyer, as much as he has his shortcomings, and I'm going to leave it at that, he is someone who has been seen in the past in that dressing room as a leader. And he did a fantastic job when he came on against Chelsea. Almost scored one of our goals of the season with that volley that would have got us the point. But I just wouldn't feel safe with two new players in there, either out of position or just completely inexperienced. Personally, I would put Emerson Royal in beside him, because they did it together on Monday. Why not give them another go? And like I said, Wolves missing that main force up front in Pedro Neto, so there's not going to be as much kind of running in behind them. But I think that for me is a safe approach. I wouldn't be surprised if Ange doesn't go with the safe approach. And I think that's what you're saying in terms of, do I have any, thank you, George, do I have any gauge of what Ange's going to do? I really don't, because he could come out with anything. And like you said, he said he'll not be afraid to play Ashley Phillips in that team. He could very well go with that approach to the game. And Phillips has absolute buckets of pace, so he could maybe be someone who fits into that Van de Ven replacement role as a good backup option. But for me, and again, I apologise, trigger warning, I do think Eric Dyer has to start.
You don't have to apologise, Matt. I think, again,
Yes, I do.
I mean, bringing Davina in there, look, I mean, the guy made 3 important clearances against Chelsea. Was the first time that we saw him under Ange Postecoglou. First time you saw Eric Dyer in a real high line like that, maybe since the Pochettino era. Do you think, Davina, and again, I'm basing this really on a 30-minute cameo appearance from Dyer, are you confident enough that you've seen enough in there to think Dyer does warrant that first start to the season, and you've got the confidence to think that he can do a job there at centre-half, depending on who he's paired with? Because again, that's the key here, isn't it? The fact is, if Dyer's starting at the weekend, it's not going to be with a Mickey van der Ven or a Christian Romero. It's, again, likely to be someone that maybe it's a Højbjerg, but then again, you look at that, that's two very unpacey players, to put it politely. I mean, what would you do, Davina, if you're Ange Postecoglou come Friday morning and looking at the tactics ball for the Saturday?
Like Matt said, I wouldn't be surprised if Ange plays an absolute wild card and does start the youth. But I think I would be quite comfortable with Dyer starting as centre-back, only to have someone who has played Premier League football against teams like this before. He might not be the fastest centre-back that we have available, but just in terms of like experience and holding down the fort a little bit, with that many of our starting 11 not there, I feel like you do need to have someone who's got a reliable head on their shoulders, like commandeering the rest of the pitch. And yeah, maybe Emerson starting alongside him. I think, if depending on how Davies is doing, I think if he says he's fit, he can also do a shift as a centre back against Wolves, and then we've got Villa, I think, afterwards. So
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be happy with like a Davies Dyer partnership. If not, then like a Davies Emerson, maybe Ashley Phillips as well. But I think just to calm my nerves a little bit, I would want a defined experienced centre-back there. Yeah.
That's fair to say. I mean, Mitch, I just wondered by the fact that we've got Matt and Davina both saying here, Eric Dyer, they would think has to start. I can see Mitch wincing when Matt said, I've got to tell you something, and then those words came out. But I mean, having said that, is the key, Mitch, here that can you play that high line if you are pairing Eric Dyer with, dare I say, a Ben Davies, a Pierre-Emile Højbjerg? Maybe you could do it if it is actually Phillips, a young, prominent, pacey player. I can see, Mitch, you hesitant to answer this. What do you think for you on this?
No, I'm just trying to process Davina saying I'd feel comfortable with a Davis-Dyer centre-back pairing.
Can I just say, this is where we've come to on game week 12 of the Premier League. What the hell has happened to us? What has happened to Tottenham?
Yeah, look, I mean, I struggle, Ricky, because, I mean, Eric Dyer was giving me a heart attack when Eric Dyer was getting up and sprinting towards the halfway line to try and play people offside and then turning back to try and run back and make those last-ditch tackles on Monday. Watching him do that against Chelsea was nearly giving me a heart attack. So I'm a little bit more reluctant. I watched Eric Dyer fail to play with two centre-backs next to him under Antonio Conte in a defensive system. So there's just something about playing a high line and the progressive attacking football that I'm not sure about. I really struggle to sit there and think, oh, God, I want Eric Dyer, or I think Eric Dyer is the right option to start on Saturday. Again, however, when you look at the alternatives, I'm not really sure there's another choice. I personally, I think, to be honest with you, if I had to pick a pair in for Saturday, I would have to pick... I would throw Ashley Phillips in there, and I think, as much as it pains me to admit it, the other one would have to be Eric Dyer, just because I'm just thinking the idea of Højbjerg dropping into centre-back, although perhaps it worked to an extent against Chelsea, it's not necessarily... The idea of going away to Wolves and watching Højbjerg be that staple centre-back in a back four and a high line against a quick attack and against a physical team is a little bit, for me. So there's issues with whoever you pick at the end of the day. There's issues if you pick Ashley Phillips because he's not got the experience in the Premier League. There's issues with Eric Dyer and Ben Davies because they don't have the pace, the recovery pace that the likes of Romero and Van de Ven have. But I think we just have to approach Saturday's game with the mentality that, right, sod the defence, we're just going to score more goals than you, and go with that sort of mentality, because however you look at it, we're going to be very weak in defence until Romero comes back 3 games out, and until Van de Ven comes back, whenever that may be.
Yeah. I mean, are we all suggesting it, guys? I mean, Matt, I got to ask you this. I mean, are we expecting this high line again? Do you think we are going to play that high line? I mean, Davina's saying nodding there. I mean, she's selected Ben Davies and Eric Dyer as the centre-backs for Wolves. I mean, it sounds nuts. I mean, really? Do you really believe this?
I'm expecting a higher line. They were too deep on Monday, Ricky. It wasn't good enough.
I mean, Wolves are without Neto, but we've got to take them a little bit seriously. Listen, they turned Man City over at home. They're not a bad side. And Gary O'Neill, I thought, was tremendous when he came onto Sky recently. He's a man that will be licking his lips potentially at the thought of having a Ben Davies, Eric Dyer partnership there.
Yeah, I just want to point out as well, because you kind of alluded to it there, Mitch, but watching the game on Monday, there was something I noticed about Eric Dyer's kind of body shape when Chelsea were in possession. When you're defending, you want to open that body up so like you're kind of facing side on, so you're ready to go either way. Eric Dyer was fully facing back towards his own goal and just watching the game over his shoulder. He just didn't have the confidence in himself to turn and make those runs. He was playing the game facing Vicario and trying to watch things over his shoulder. It was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, no, we're going to play that same way. We're going to play that high line, whether it's Dyer and Højbjerg, whether it's Phillips and Darrington, or whether Ange puts himself at centre half. Whatever it is, we're going to play that high line, and I think it's what the four of us would want to see. It's what everyone, or the majority of people watching, would want to see. And I know there was that criticism of the way he played against Monday, but ultimately he's there to make sure that Tottenham fans are enjoying the football that they're watching. He's not there to make sure that Chelsea fans are happy with his approach. He's not there to make Arsenal fans aware that he knows what he's doing tactically. He's there to make Tottenham fans happy at what they're seeing on a football pitch when they go there on a Saturday. And the reaction of the Tottenham fans on Monday, the majority of them, if not all of them, were happy with what they saw. So I don't see why he would change that, regardless of what that centre-back partnership is.
Okay, Matt's just thinking very quickly. If no James Maddison, and again, must stress that we'll know more about Maddison's situation ahead of Ange's press conference, which we'll hold later in the week. Are you confident if it's a Davina, Lo Celso, or Rodrigo Bentancur in there? I think the key thing is that I think we're all taken away from here. The midfield and forwards have got to win the game for Tottenham because the defence is a concern. So there's got to be real pressure applied from midfield to forward line, that there's then a lesser reliance on the defence to focus on the result. How confident are you if there is no James Maddison, we've got enough in reserve with the likes of Lo Celso coming in, or as I said, Rodrigo Bentancur coming into that midfield?
It's a complete unknown, and yeah, I said earlier, and Davina said the same, that while we have had a lot of individual brilliance, there's a lot of kind of tactical things that have made us good this season. There's nothing tactical about James Maddison that makes us good. He is just a world-class footballer playing at the moment at his very, very best, and you can't replace that. Whether you play Lo Celso or Bentancur or both of them in that midfield, you're not going to get what Maddison offers. I had kind of been thinking that maybe Bentancur is a better option, but I do agree with what Davina said as well, that you don't want to rush him back and you don't want to put him in there too early and risk re-aggravating that injury, because that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to us at the moment. My absolute dream scenario would be put Kulusevski in that central position, Johnson on the left, Son up top, and maybe a Brian Hill or an Alejo Valise out on the right hand side, which I know we're obviously lacking a lot out there, but I think that number 10 position has been much more important to us this season than the right wing position. And I think the way Maddison has been finding a lot of space with that left winger, put him right out to the touchline and opening up that space between the right back and the centre half. I think Kulusevski will A, have the pace, and B, also be on a strong left foot to make something happen if he does get into those areas. So maybe throw him in there. We still have that creativity in there, and just accept that we're going to be a little bit weaker out on the right hand side, whether that is Hill or Valise. We're not going to be as good, but I think we still should have enough to get something against Wolves. Even though, like you mentioned, they beat City, Liverpool struggled there, and they got the point against Newcastle as well. They are doing well against the bigger teams, but hopefully we'll have enough. Yeah,
Wolves currently they're 14th in the Premier League table, 12 points from 11 matches. Of course, they're coming, Mitch, off the back of that 2-1 loss, shock 2-1 loss to Sheffield United. So they'll be in the mood to really try and get things, back to a steady point. Of course, being at home, it's a big game for them. Tottenham coming is always a big game. And look, I think Wolves up to the point of Sheffield United were enjoying a 5-game unbeaten streak, 2 wins and the 3 draws, as Matt picked up on there. Do you think, Mitch, when you look at our midfield forward options, that we've got enough in there? When you consider that we can have, as Adrian says here, free from Bentancur, Lo Celso, Kulu, Højbjerg, Skip. When you add to the fact that hopefully Brennan Johnson will be fit and ready to go after obviously having to come off early on and being sacrificed in the game. You confident the forward options can do the job here for us, Mitch?
Yeah, I was saying to a colleague at work today, we were chatting about the game and Spurs going forward, and I said to him, do you know what? For the next few games, it's probably just going to have to be a complete all-out attack approach and just see if we can outscore our opponents. Like I said earlier, I think the midfield finally is looking... It's a shame that Madders is perhaps not going to be about for Saturday's game, but it's finally looking strong in the middle of the park, at least. When you think about Basuma, Sarr, Maddison when he's fit, Bentancur back, Skip, Lo Celso... That's 6 players that can play across that middle, which is, something that we've not had in a little while, which is really good. And we talked about the attack already. I think the good thing is that we have goals. Another great confidence boost for Kulusevski, grabbing a goal early on against Chelsea on Monday, who I think looked very good. Brennan Johnson, we've talked about already, who's looked sharp every time he's played so far, and he was, of course, instrumental in that game last week as well. So I think scoring goals isn't necessarily going to be our issue. I think it's what we've been talking about all night, which is the defence that is possibly going to be the issue. But if Sir Vicario wants to play like he did on Monday every single week, then we might as well not play with a defence at all and just let him do the business, because he looked absolutely phenomenal.
It was unbelievable.
So, yeah, I think Do you know what, Ricky? It's a Saturday, early kickoff. Just go there, get the job done, and then let us just, put Spurs to the back of our mind for a few weeks and see what goes on in the international break. Pretend to care about that a little bit, or pretend not to care about it, whatever it is. And just, the good thing about playing the early kickoff on Saturday is that, we don't have to worry about the pressures of other teams having already played. Ange's message should be, right, listen, lads, if we go to Wolves, we're the first game of the weekend, go there and win, we're back at the top of the league. That's the reality of the situation. We go 2 points clear at the league. City don't play until 4:30 on Sunday, and they're away to Chelsea. It's not a given. So there's absolutely no reason why we should have too much fear about the game. I don't want to be naive about it. It's going to be tougher than perhaps it should be with the injuries, with the suspensions, and we are going to look vulnerable. I think we just have to accept that. I think we're going to have to accept that Wolves are going to have chances. And as you said a minute ago, they're a good side. I was equally impressed with Gary O'Neill when he was on Sky Sports. I thought the insight of a Premier League manager like him is absolutely brilliant, and it just shows how much work and knowledge goes into the game at that level. So as you said, they beat City at home. Wolves away always seems to throw up a really weird game for us. So let's just hope that we can beat that 12:30 curse again this season, and keep the mood largely positive, because all of a sudden you lose 2 games in a row, you're sat there thinking, oh crap, we've got Villa next, and then oh no, we've got Newcastle next, and then we've got City, and all of a sudden you start spiraling. So I think a win could be really important for us on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And finally, Davina, just to you, you look at Wolves in general for them, this is a real opportunity for them to take a scout. We know they're without Pedro Neto, Hugo Bueno, and Joseph Hodge at the moment. I just wondered, do you share that same theme that Mitch and Matt are saying, that there's going to be a real emphasis and focus on the attacking players in our squad? Brennan Johnson, hopefully, we'll be able to see him on the score sheet, because I think, as guys have said here, it feels like he's only played a couple of games for us, and he was sacrificed, of course, against Chelsea. I mean, how much emphasis do you put on that forward line and midfield to do the job for us?
I think it's going to be a matter of score and put as much pressure on Wolves as possible, so that our defence doesn't have to do that much of they don't have to put that much of a shift in. I think that should be our focus. And, we've got a really good record on the road this season. We've got the most points away from home, 14 points, 4 wins, 2 draws. So playing 14th place Wolves, also both of us coming off the back of a loss. So definitely be up for it. And it's the early kickoff. Never back the early kickoff. Wolves away is always tough. I was at Wolves away last season when we lost 1-0, and that was just shocking. I remember that so vividly. And it will be tricky, but as Mitch said, it should be the focus that take every game one game at a time, focus on getting those 3 points, and then just sit back and relax and just let international break do its thing. Let the players recover. Give everyone a chance to also recover from Monday, chill out a little bit, and restart when we play Villa when we come back. It's just a matter of getting the game over the line, playing the way that we play, grinding out a result, which we should be able to do with the subs that we have on the bench, with the players that we have at our disposal. I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be fine. Just look to get that game done.
Well, Davina's trying to convince us all. Let's start with Davina. Let's go to predictions. Davina, what's your prediction going to be for this one? What are you going to go for?
It's always such a tricky game playing Wolves. I'm going 1-0 to Tottenham.
Okay, 1-0 to Spurs.
Yeah.
Matt, let's come around to you. What are you going to go for? Molineux, as we said, 12:30 early kick-off Spurs, to chance to go back to the top, maybe momentarily. We go for me.
Do I have to? I'll go 2-1 Spurs. So
I don't blame you, Matt. I mean, these are the games that nobody wants to predict, because, again, it's the first time we're in a bit of adversity where I think many are expecting Spurs to slip up. Mitch, let's close it with you. What are you going to go for?
3-0 Spurs.
Wow, okay.
And
Where's that come from? Where's that come from?
Do you know what? I just most of the time I'll come on and I'll say, oh yeah, we'll win 2-1 or 3-2 or 1-0 or something. But I'm going to go brave this week and I'm going to give us a comfortable win because everyone is going to go into that game thinking, yeah, Spurs going to lose here. They've lost all of their good players. They've got 2 suspended players. We're going to come out with a rocket up their backsides and we're going to put them to bed early. And Basuma's going to score an absolute screamer.
Well, mate, I hope so. And fingers crossed, I say no booking for Basuma. Still, of course, riding that tightrope. Mitch, always a pleasure, mate. Where can everybody find you across the socials?
So over on X for me, mainly at the moment, although I have taken a break since Monday night's game because there's just so many people I dislike on there and the For You page or whatever it is stresses me out. But yeah, over on X, at Mitch_Fretton. Feel free to come say hello over there. And Ricky, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for having me back on. And Matt and Davina, it's also been a pleasure chatting to you.
Oh, mate, lovely. Looking forward to you back on with us soon, Mitch. Hopefully where we can still be as positive as possible. Davina, come around to you. Apart from your holiday, in which we have definitely seen on X recently, some wonderful pictures on there. You've been gallivanting by the looks of it. It's all happening in your life, I tell you. Where can everybody catch you on the socials?
At Davina_THFC on X, on Instagram, sometimes post on TikTok as well, like a match day vlog. So yeah, you can find me on there. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I've had so much fun both times that you've had me on. And Matt and Mitch, lovely to speak to you as well.
I've got to say, Joe, it's fun, isn't it? You know, we cover the back of a result like that. People are still having fun on here. It just shows you where this season has taken us to actually under a different manager and the fact that we are still positive. Matt, let's close it with you. Matt, where can everybody find you? I'm sure you're dying to tell us where can everybody find the wonderful Matty Hayes.
You can find me over on Twitter as well. And yes, I'm sticking to calling it Twitter, at Matt Hayes THFC. My last post is a Swedish rendition of an Elton John song. Aside from that, I post about football. So I would appreciate any support over there. To be an absolute pleasure to meet you, Mitch. Great to speak to you again. And Ricky, as always, I've enjoyed it.
Bless you. Guys, thank you so much. That's wonderful, Mitch. Brilliant, Davina, and the superb Matty Hayes. We have been the Last Word on Spurs. We are back with you after, of course, the Wolves game, where hopefully Spurs have gone back and will be staying top of the Premier League. But from all of us here, guys, please keep safe, keep well. Thank you so much for all your support. And as always, keep the faith.